Hello, everyone. You have reached the Python Pulse live stream. I am so excited today. It is Friday the 13th, and I count myself very, very lucky because I have amazing colleagues on the line today. We have something really great in store for you. So we're going to be talking about open source. I give permission for everyone to clown me in the comments for the spoopy. I thought it was cute. Apparently it's not good to translate, but basically we're just doing a combination of cute and spooky and open source today. Okay, so it is every second Friday of the month. So this is the second Friday of the month today at 11 a.m. Pacific. I am your host, Dawn Wages, and I'm the Python community advocate here at Microsoft. And we're bringing you another episode. So I see a bunch of people signing on. If you could say hello in the chat, where you're from, how you heard about the Python Pulse, actually, that would be something I'm really curious about, where you heard about us from. Put that in the chat. It's really nice to know that other people are here, and specifically because we have a Q&A today, put your questions in the chat about open source because we have some prolific open source authors, contributors, people who are interested on this call today with us. So first, I'm going to go through some announcements. Then we're going to go through a VS Code profile. We might edit and critique it live. I think we might bring it back up because I think I should get some advice from my colleagues as well. And then we're going to jump into the episode. All right, let's do some announcements. So we're announcing that Python is now in Excel. You might have heard it on the interwebs. It's been a pretty noisy product release. So if you've not heard about it, go check it out. Python is now in Excel. Transform your data analytics with Python and Excel by using Python libraries to clean up, explore, and analyze data right within a familiar Excel environment. I also did a VS Code workshop. Apologies for the self-promotion, but I was really excited about the VS Code workshop. So if you know anything about it, or if you have questions about supercharging your Python environment in VS Code, dev containers, or code spaces, at me on the socials. I'm on Mastodon and X, and LinkedIn are probably the best places to get a hold of me. So I'll also be at DjangoCon in person this next week with a friend on the call, and one of our colleagues is going to be in the same area. GPS is giving a keynote at All Things Open. So try to sign up for All Things Open if you're looking for some tickets. There's also DjangoCon. You can shout out and say hi to myself and Jay in person at DjangoCon. AZD is now at 1.4.0. That's the Azure Developer CLI. It's an open source command line tool that accelerates the time it takes for you to take your application from local development environment to the cloud. So what it does is it combines high-level application developer commands like init, up, pipeline config with extensible declarative blueprint templates to keep things simple and easy to use. We have the Azure SDK for Python, which now supports vector search. And then we'll also be at PyData NYC. It's a 3-day in-person event for data scientists, data engineers, developers, all that jazz. And it will be in Microsoft's Times Square office, which is mega cool. So I'll see you there. We have a colleague, Shreya, who is also giving a talk, which is going to be awesome. So that's it. No more announcements. If you want any more of the announcements, I like zoomed through them. They're in the show notes at the bottom of the screen. That's aka.ms/Python Pulse /ep for episode /11 /show -notes. Okay, we're all done. Now I'm going to bring everybody else on the screen, and then we could go through this like VS Code profile together, and I'm open for critiques. I'll show you what I did for my profile, and because we have contributors on the line, we'll get some advice from them. All right. Hello.
So,
Would you like to introduce yourself, Jay?
no, I'm kidding. I'll do it. What's up? I'm Jay Miller, Senior Cloud Advocate for the Python team. I do Python things, obviously. I guess the other world that I'm in is I am the founder of Black Python Devs. So yeah, if that's a spot that you want to hang out in, like, come reach out to me and we'll get you added.
Awesome. Okay. Hey, Josh. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Josh. I am the program manager for the Python team. I guess outside of like Python-y stuff, I actually really enjoy doing mechanical engineering, like design work and like aerospace-y stuff. So that stuff's always on my mind.
Yeah, we had some good chats on that. I learned a bunch. So hopefully it comes up some more today. And hello. Hi,
Hello,
Pamela.
everyone. Hi, I'm Pamela, also a Python advocate, and I really like using Python to make web apps, but also, do other fun stuff with data and whatnot. And besides that, I like to raise caterpillars, and there's a pupa on my wall right now, which is pretty on my outside wall, so I can just watch it every day. It's a beautiful pupa. It's
That's
spoopa.
awesome.
Spoopy.
Is it just spoopy pupa?
It's a spoopy. It's a spoopy pupa.
But we also made some poop jokes in the chat earlier because we are adults. Because of the spoopy. Anyway. Okay, so I'm going to show the Python profile that I created. For those who are not familiar with profiles, profiles is a tool that you can use to save and export all of your settings in VS Code. We started at the beginning of the summer. Every episode comes associated with a profile, so you can find it at aka.ms /Python Pulse. You can do the episode number, and then it'll have profile. But you can also find it on the stream notes. So I'll just go to the stream notes at the stage so you can see that. Yes, because I'm doing things, you can see it. So this is the stream notes. It's just like a GitHub repo. And at the top, I have this profile. Boop, boop. And so what you could do when you export these, it will, let's also increase the zoom. Is that what? What you can do when you export these profiles is you can also open it up in vscode.dev, which is the browser editor for VS Code. Many of the same features involved, and you get to code on the go, right? And here's it opening. I have a lot of the same functionality that are in the default Python profiles that just comes when you want to open up a Python profile. But I also added Witch Hazel, which is created by some of our friends. I don't know if people are familiar with Thea Codes. Very, very cool person, and it makes it very pretty and purple. And then I also have another one created by one of our colleagues who has a video on this call, but it's not on the call. Python Task Provider. Python Task Provider. There you go, Visual Studio Marketplace. And this was created by Anthony, where it helps with like setup tools for tasks.json. Tasks.json is a really interesting feature for VS Code because it lets you run automated tasks. And as I've been talking more about VS Code, it doesn't come up very much. So if you install this and you're doing some open source contribution, hopefully it provides some services for you. You can give us some feedback as well. Yeah, so team who contributes on the call too, like what do you use in your profiles? Are there extensions that you or settings that are helpful? Or did I cover them all?
There's this tiny extension called Add Code of Conduct. So when
Yes!
you're creating new projects, you can add a code of conduct to it.
Okay, we're taking
The
notes.
maintainer is garbage though. Don't trust them.
Can you tell us who the maintainer is?
Nah,
So we're not
nah.
accused of talking crap on
Some person named Jay Miller. I don't know.
some awesome person named Jay Miller. I'm gonna take notes on the things that we'd like to add. Actually, I'll just add it on the spot. Let's do code of conduct. And I found it.
SEO. I love it.
All right. So it's not available for the web, but we're going to open it up and put it on the VS Code app, and then I'll update the extension at that link so everyone can have access to it too. Do we have any other extension suggestions? Pamela, what do you use?
I use Rough. You already add Rough in there.
Oh yeah, Rough yeah, we're fan favorites of Rough.
Rainbow CSV is so cool. I learned about that during one of the Python pulses, and it'll make your CSVs beautiful. That's very specific if you're somebody who has CSVs that you use.
We all need beautiful CSV files.
You know, and you need more like rainbows, right?
Absolutely.
I
wanna
think
write
I've
them
actually
down.
crashed that extension before with like some pretty gnarly CSV files.
Oh, Jay.
It had like 10,000 individual columns. So-
See, I'm just opening like 10 rows just so I can get some rainbow action in my editor. Like, I'm not even doing anything with it. I just
I love
wanted to
it.
see the colors.
I love it. Okay, this is good. I'll update the extension accordingly. Everybody watch out for that. It's good now. It's better later. Okay. And that's it. So if I wanted to export it, sharing it with our friends. Oh, and this is also a way to check all the settings. So these are the extensions that are part of the profile. We have keyboard shortcuts. This is what the default Python extension has. I didn't make any changes here. We also have user snippets. And so the default Python extension does come with snippets out of the box. So that's fantastic. And we have tasks. And others. There you go. That's what we have so far. Just an outline. But yeah, so excited that we got to share that with you today. And we'll move on to like the stuff we've been working on. Let's close this out. And yeah, so we have a question and answer kind of period going on, and we're just gonna go through normal conversations on open source, and then we'll pepper it through some like pre-recorded videos that we have to break up some of the fun. And make sure that you keep putting in the channel questions on open source. Let's start with like everyone's experience with open source and how they feel about it, like warm and fuzzies, or oh yeah, let's do some spicy takes too. Jay, do you want to start?
Yeah, so let's see. In terms of open source contributions, I don't have that many. I'm the person that like has so many of my own open source projects that when Hacktoberfest pops up, I wind up getting it, but it's always because it's my own projects. So I kind of cheated the system. I don't think you can do that anymore.
You won't get a t-shirt at least.
Well, you're not getting a t-shirt, period. But that's another story. But yeah, I have worked with a lot of communities that rely heavily on open source, and often in terms of finding issues to give back. I kind of serve as a little bit more of a mentor that helps them identify some of the things that they want to do. I believe in getting people open source contributions of substance Like, let's not make 15 million well, I mean, actually, there is a cool repo called Hello World that's like Hello World in like every single programming language on the planet. It's pretty cool. But like, let's let them identify ways that they want to contribute to open source, and then let's work to provide avenues to doing that, not necessarily to benefit us. And yeah, I work to kind of do that if I can. I think you're muted.
I was trying to be respectful, and then I'm just like, burp, 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 burp. I'll go counterclockwise, and then we'll do Pamela and Josh next. So I relate to your comment very heavily. I started in the open source community mostly with event organizing. So there's a couple of Hacktoberfest that I've gotten because I'm like contributing to like websites to update for events around the month of October. So that's nice. I started with documentation. I have a few demo repos that I maintain. But like, yeah, my next step is like having a package that like is published to PyPI that I'm like managing, and then like goal is I'm adopting a puppy or I guess a cake. And yeah, I like the street cred and associated with it. So I don't know. Well, that's my next goal. What about you, Pamela?
Okay, yeah, so that's such a good segue because I actually think that I first like really experienced open source very vicariously in that I was dating somebody who developed a very popular project, and so I could kind of see the effect of having a really popular project and the kind of good and bad that comes with that. And then around that time there was also a talk from someone in the same community. This is in the JavaScript community because that's where I was for a long time. And there's a talk called what is open source and why do I feel so bad? I think that was the name of the talk, and I showed Don the video. And that was from the creator of Twitter Bootstrap, because Twitter Bootstrap started as this little thing, and then it became huge, and it really turned into a puppy that needed a lot of care. And it was so it was really interesting to see the emotional effect that open source can have on people. Because on the one hand, like, oh my gosh, it's great, everybody loves my puppy, but then you're getting 300 reports a day. And so I what I observed is like open source maintainers that are maintaining really popular projects, they tend to develop firm boundaries because they have to, right? And you'll see this with established projects, this is what I've seen with a lot of them, is that they're like much stricter about you have to have good bug reports, you have to have good pull requests, like everything has to be done really well, because they don't physically have time for the quantity of stuff that can happen when you have a popular project. So I am somebody who has I'm really bad at boundaries, and that does concern me with having a project come too popular. Like I am helping to maintain this very popular sample app right now for our the OpenAI plus cognitive search, and it's like our most starred sample app for Azure samples. And I am like, I don't even have the heart to close issues, because every time I see an issue, I see the kernel of truth in it. I'm like, yes, you're right. There is something that if I had time, I would improve the experience so that this would never have happened to you. Even if it was just like, something particular, some Windows setup, right? Like, it's like, there's always something I could improve by the documentation or something. So I don't close any of the issues. Like I let other people close them, but I barely close any issues at all. I'm kind of like hoarding issues, but I also do that because I think it makes it easier for other people to find if they happen to be experiencing the same issue with their setup. So I haven't learned to have boundaries yet, but that's because also it's just about the amount of traffic. So yeah, I don't know. That's like the interesting thing about open source is that it can force you to realize what your boundaries are and come up with ways to enforce them.
I feel that so much. Just specifically with the take, I think we talked about this before about like when something's broken, and I'm like, it's clearly me. I clearly broke the thing. It's my problem in chair, not in computer. so I don't file issues nearly as much as I should. Maybe a different side of the same coin. So anyway, thank you for that. And Josh, what about you?
So I'm fairly new to the software space in general. My previous background was mostly in mechanical engineering, aerospace, a little bit of electrical. But I guess in terms of like 3D modeling software, there's a huge open source community for just like putting your models out there and having people take their whatever stub file you upload and then like repurposing that. Whether you're just trying to do like an at-home project for maybe you're trying to build like a I don't know, like a special like clock tower thing, or um, I don't know, a shelf to hold your books that's like specific to like whatever you're doing. Um, it can there's huge like hubs that have a ton of like resources and I guess options for like advertising and downloading those files, but it's kind of similar in the sense with software, like how you're maintaining, there's a lot of people asking questions, and like so what Pamela was saying about like all of that experience. I personally haven't gotten to that point where it's like, okay, I need to set boundaries. But I can definitely see how that applies to like more than just the software industry in general.
Do you have a 3D printer?
I
Is that
do.
when you do? I don't
Yes.
think you and my wife could nerd out on that because she has this 3D printer. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she just keeps printing like tiny Jigglypuffs. I'm like, what else are we gonna do with this? I think we should probably like collab on some like on some of those CAD designs that you're talking about and get
For
her
sure.
to do some cool things. Cool. Thank you for that. I'm excited to jump into some of the questions that we have today. Again, just to remind everyone, feel free to ask just general questions and like give comments. We also have some really cool maintainers that I've seen popping through the chat as well. So give your experience as well, and I'll pop them on the screen. So first question we have is, what are some common mistakes people might make when contributing to an open source project? And before I ask the knowledgeable people on the call and we rap about it, I have a video.
Can't hear. We can't hear Anthony.
You cannot.
Mm-mm.
I can hear Anthony. That's unfortunate.
Maybe there's a setting to share audio from your computer.
Yeah, I thought I did it. Okay, let's try it again. Technical difficulties. Someone entertain the audience.
So this is our first time we're trying to involve Anthony because Anthony's in Australia and it is real early in the morning for him right now, like 3 a.m. or something. And but Anthony has a huge amount of experience with open source. He maintains the very popular VS Code Pets, but then also a bunch of things that aren't pet related and are like really pretty nerdy, like performance Python performance related, because he's actually doing a thesis right now about Python performance. So yeah, we're trying to involve Anthony. Let's see if it works.
Okay, attempt number 2.
Good question, Dawn. So yeah, what are some common mistakes people might make when making changes or submitting changes via pull request to an open source project? So there's kind of 3 common things that I see quite a bit. The first one is that a pull request is submitted, but the checks don't pass. This is really common. So in a project, when we accept pull requests, we set up a lot of automation to check the code, the unit tests, to run linters, to look at style checks and things like that. These are all automated. And the idea is that the main branch, all the checks pass. So if you submit a pull request with your changes in it, then I'm not going to merge that until the checks pass in your pull request. So in GitHub, you'll see all those ticks and crosses and the checks tab in the pull request. So until those checks pass, it's not going to get merged. So there's normally in a contributing document or somewhere in the documentation, it'll tell you how to run the checks if you want to run them manually, or just look at the output from GitHub and it'll tell you maybe the unit tests have stopped working, maybe it doesn't comply with the code formatting or the code style, and you just need to run a tool like rough or black again. So yeah, that's a common thing I see, is that someone submits a pull request, and then the first thing I have to do is to ask them to go and fix the tests or to run the code linter. The second thing I think is a common mistake people make is that they submit more than one change in a pull request. Now, this is really important because ideally a pull request should be atomic. So it should be a standalone change. So for example, if somebody submitted a new feature and at the same time they happen to notice a bug and then fix that bug in the same pull request. Now, the issue that I have as a maintainer is that if I merge those changes and then there are issues down the line, and I look at the change, I don't know whether it was the feature or the bug fix that created a problem. So if you spot a bug and you want to fix a bug, raise a separate pull request. So each pull request should really contain one change and no more than that. And then the third thing I see is that people submit features, which is brilliant, but they didn't raise an issue first and discuss the feature. And sometimes the feature is not really in the direction of the project. So it's something that is maybe something I don't really want to maintain in the long term, or it's just not part of the design of the project, or maybe it'll be confusing or it conflicts with something else. There's various reasons, I guess. But if you've put all of that work in to build a new feature and then submit it as a pull request, and as a maintainer, I feel really bad for saying, actually, no, I don't really want to merge that because it's not something really what in the project. It doesn't go with the direction the project's going in or what it was designed to do. So in that case, if you want to submit a new feature, raise an issue first and discuss it with the maintainer. They might have some different ideas, or they might say, if you did implement it, can you do it this way? And again, maybe the feature is brilliant, but just the way it was done or the interface or the way you have to interact with it is just not something that the maintainer wants to be done. So they might ask you to make changes. But if you discuss all that stuff up front in the issue, then it means you don't have to go and redo all of your work. So yeah, those are the three common things I see. Just to summarize, the first one was that you haven't checked that the checks pass. The second one is that you've submitted more than one change in a pull request. And then the third one is that you haven't raised an issue beforehand to discuss a new feature.
You're muted again.
Yes. Okay, that was so good, as I expected. I'm so appreciative of those responses. And specifically the one about the feature being outside of just the prerequisites, the predefined expectations of a project. That's one that we talk about a lot on the Wagtail CMS core team. Really, really interesting because it's an opinionated CMS on top of an opinionated framework. So people really are adamant about injecting their opinions in it. And sometimes the opinions, even after discussion, may just be outside of scope. Not that they're not awesome. Do you have more thoughts? What are some common mistakes people might make contributing to an open source project?
I love the like you did all of this work without asking if this work was something that was wanted. That one hits home. I put in the chat like my first contribution to like someone else's Python package. Actually, I think Pamela and I worked on this together. Was to Cookie Cutter. And I was like, there's this whole feature that I specifically need for this one thing that we wound up not even using that is now a part of like Cookie Cutter's code base. And like I feel like my justification for it made sense. And now every time I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, I did that. But also we had the code laying in wait and we had the tests and everything else. And like we filed the issue and we were just like patiently waiting for them to go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And they're like, okay, cool. Here's the PR. That could have backfired really badly. So, and then also there were, it introduced bugs and then we had to go in and fix the bugs. And, anytime you're wanting to contribute, it's great. Like, absolutely. People, like a lot of maintainers like me, would love to have people knocking down my doors and littering my inbox with ways that they could contribute to my project. That doesn't mean that I have to accept every single one. So save yourself the energy and like file the issue, wait for the issue to be like, that's a good idea. Someone should work on that, and then start working on it.
Perfect. So we have a few more questions to go, so I'm going to try to zoom through. Our next one is, should we have one-on-one open source mentorship or open source programs, and how do we decide what works? So let's go to the pre-recorded one and see what this really smart person has to say.
So I want to first state that it's not one or the other, that we should have both open source programs that suggest or encourage people to contribute to open source. But I also think that one-on-one mentorship is also required in that, and sometimes facilitated through those programs. And here's why. Many of these programs have a lot of information, a lot of valuable information to give to those contributors. These are how to make those first contributions, how to find those issues, those good first issues, those things that can allow for people to evolve into long-term maintainers. But it's often not knowledge or information that prevents people from maintaining. They often need that extra encouragement. And while you can get that through open source programs, you know, it feels good to be a part of something big, be a part of a community of people that are doing a thing. You still might need that extra push. And this is where that one-on-one mentorship can come in. Someone who is knowledgeable towards contributing to open source can help that person find and identify the different issues and projects and tasks that are going to allow them to show what they know. And it allows you to move past any of the anxieties and fears and concerns about being outed as an imposter. Once they make that first contribution, they're going to be more likely to make those subsequent contributions, often to the same project. But sometimes you need a little more encouragement and help to find that perfect first contribution that's going to make you a long-term maintainer.
100%. Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. Do we have more thoughts on that? I also, just like, it's a full circle. When we first all introduced ourselves in our open source contributions, we were a very humble crowd. All of us were kind of a little impostery in it. So kudos on that one as well at that point. Do you have more thoughts on mentorship programs before we move on to the next question? I think you covered so many things, Jay.
There's some great, I mean, there's some great like summer programs, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, is Google still doing the Google Summer of Open Source? They did that for a long time.
Code. And there's also
Summer of Code.
Google Summer of Documentation, I think, as well.
Oh, is there
I
now?
was one of
Okay.
the, I don't know, not quite a mentor, but slightly of an organizer for Wagtail. And then Django does it as well for Google Summer of Code. So
Nice.
that's fun. There's Django Not Space. There's the Kubernetes group that does things. There's a NumFocus mentorship group that I just learned about a couple of days ago that I don't know much about. Black Python Devs does awesome work and some things with that too. So really, really excited. And actually, full circle, talking about my partner, talking to Josh about CAD designs. It's another thing. It's not a mentorship program, but it's one-on-one. People just like coming together and talking about how to do open source more, better, faster, where to find the things. So absolutely, like, kudos on that one. Okay, let's keep moving. We got good things. Next question is, open source software has collaboration and competition. How have you seen this, and how do we bridge the gap? And we have another one of our smart colleagues talking about it a bit.
Yeah, so my past background is more so in mechanical, electrical, aerospace applications, in design. And I more recently got into the software industry, but the open source community absolutely applies in that scenario, and specifically using softwares like CAD, which is computer aided design softwares. Um, there are a lot of different products and options out there from different companies. There are also open source options, um, just developed by people who didn't like what already existed. And so, in terms of options and availability, there's a lot. But the actual interactability between those softwares, because they're all competing organizations, even the open source, they didn't like what already existed, so they made a new software, right? Um, all of those things are competing. And so when it comes to collaboration between people who use those different types of softwares, sometimes it can be really tricky and sometimes and frankly annoying when you're trying to collaborate with different people. But there's always like ways to get over the hump. For example, like specifically with CAD, there um, without there's a particular file type called a step file, which allows you to kind of share different like models across all of those different CAD systems. However, it's like a lot less detailed than the specific file types that the system uses. So while it isn't like a perfect fix, there's always like a little bit of like collaboration between the entire industry, but at the same time there's that competitive focus between all of those companies, between the open source community and beyond.
Definitely. And God, I love it when an industry converges on one solution and they've all just kind of decided and it trickles through. Do we have thoughts on kind of competing solutions or alternate approaches that kind of maybe impede workflow or any other experiences with that?
I can expand actually,
Yeah.
because I didn't use any specific examples when I was answering the other day, but back when I used to do some design work for NASA, I remember working with a program called Creo and Parametric. And so there's a student version and then there's a professional version. And their file types don't interact with each other. So when we were originally kind of like onboarding as like interns, um, basically we didn't realize that we needed to upgrade our version. It didn't auto like update for us when we switched over to like a different like set of like software and hardware. So we ended up creating all of our models. We were like, oh, this is great. And then when we were at the point like, okay, let's like start sending over models so that we can collaborate on this like bigger projects. We weren't able to do that because it was just not the same file type. And so like, we had to backtrack a little bit. We had a couple options. It was either, okay, we start from scratch and we rebuild this model on the professional version, or we just send over the step file, which a little bit of clarification on that. Each of these like different like companies, their CAD modeling software tends to use like a specific file type that keeps track of like different like features while you're modeling that object. So with the step file, it's just it basically merges all those features into one single blob. And then that's what you get sent from somebody else if you're modeling off of that piece. So if you want to change that individual piece, you kind of need to ask the person who's maintaining that piece to help you change that to get the file from them, or you're kind of just out of luck. So just, yeah, there's a lot of growing pains, I guess. Even within the same company, having different versions of the same software, not being able to collaborate is really
Right. So like essentially like that's vendor lock-in to a degree. And you
yes.
also see that with some like open source databases, for example, which is why you don't write your own serializers. So you can communicate between your app and your different open source DBs. It kind of helps transcend the gap on some of these functional uses. Absolutely. That makes total sense. Cool. All right. We can have more thoughts on this, or we can move on to the next question. What do you think? Next one? All right. Next one.
Well, Pamela, I think, had a topic, but She's muted.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I can't hear Pamela. At least it's not just me. Mm-mm.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
We've
Well, we
completely
have
lost
your
Pamela.
we have your video coming up. I'll introduce you. This is yours, right? Okay. What tools, and as we do, I guess we'll entertain the audience while we fix technical difficulties. So what tools are helpful to learn when contributing to open source Python projects? Let's do Pamela's video. Is it playing? Play. It was playing before. What's the technical difficulties? It's not just me, right?
No, we can't. It's not playing. I jokingly put git push force in the chat, but I think understanding git is probably a good one.
Yeah,
Also-
understanding Git is really important.
Also testing tools. Oh my goodness, like there's a lot of different things with testing, from like just standard PyTest stuff. I've told like 3 people this week that they should really take a look at Tox for like testing multiple Python versions and things like that. I mean, there's so many different testing platforms and things that you can learn that are often required by the maintainers. And I definitely love the idea of, as maintainers, we should help with that a little bit, but like also I think there should be kind of an expectation of like, I need you to know how to navigate through GitHub, like, or GitLab, or, whatever Git provider you're using, however this code is being stored. I so many times, like, first call mentorship sessions is like, this is how you fork code. This is how you open up a code space. This is how you do a lot of these things. And one, I'm going to blame our education systems for that. Like, come on, let's get better at talking about these things that we really need. But also, like, that stuff isn't sexy. It's not like the cool, like, super optimizing Python stuff, but it's so essential because I write more stuff in GitHub than I do in VS Code in most of my days.
That's absolutely fair. And also testing, our friend is back.
Hello?
Hello, we got you. Okay, good.
Okay. I wonder if the video will work now. It's because I updated my Mac this week and just everything has gone to heck. And I only even upgraded to Ventura because I'm scared of Sonoma, but maybe I should just go ahead and I'm not good at updating things. I can't deal with the change.
Did anyone Sting fans? Ghost in the Machine? Okay, I don't know. Okay, anyway.
My question is, what tools are useful when contributing to Python open source projects? I've done Python programming for quite a long time, but it's only recently that I've really started contributing a lot to open source Python packages. And I found that there's like a whole set of tools that you end up using a lot more when contributing to packages that you may not be using in your own, personal Python projects or even your work Python projects, depending on what you do. So I just want to put a plug for those tools to give everyone a heads up. The first one is actually how documentation is usually written. I think a lot of us, when we write documentation, we think of like writing a GitHub README, and there we're using Markdown, MD files. But in fact, lots of the documentation out there is written using Sphinx, which is a tool that the language it uses is called restructured text, or RST. So the files you see are RST. And I actually really like it. I wrote a book using it, this kind of handbook book way back in the day, like 10, 15 years ago, using RST. It's more powerful, more expressive than Markdown, and it's more extensible. And that's, I think, why it's so popular to write, documentation, books, etc. And a lot of the Python projects use it. So that's one of the first things you might do, because a lot of times the first thing we do when we contribute is we write documentation. Like here was a PR from someone, someone's first PR to Matplotlib, and it was, making this documentation change. And this is in fact RST. It looks similar to Markdown. Some of the things are the same, like the way you do bolded lists, but the links, the way it does links is actually quite different. So that is something that you might end up using, and you can go through the RST primer here and learn a lot. And you can also just learn by looking through a code base and seeing how they're already writing things. That's usually one of the best ways to learn it, just in case they have anything that's specific to that code base. Another tool to talk about is Tox. Tox is a tool that can run lots and lots of tools in different environments. Yeah, so here you see Tox is for automation and standardized testing. So a lot of projects use Tox in order to run a whole bunch of things across other environments. And it was particularly helpful, especially before, GitHub Actions made it easy to run things against matrices. But a lot of the projects that I've worked with have used Tox. For example, like with Flask SQL Alchemy, when we dropped Python 3.7 support, I had to update quite a few files, and one of those was the Tox file, which is tox.ini. And so I had to, this was pretty easy to update. I just had to remove the 7. But there were definitely times that I had to learn about all the other different syntax in Tox in order to, use an environment or modify an environment. So Tox is another useful tool. I also find myself using MyPy or Pywrite a lot more. Typically MyPy, both of these are type checkers. And a lot of times Python packages will have type annotations because they're really helpful for IntelliSense and editors. And if the types aren't right, a lot of times we get bugs. So some of the first issues are actually, for many people, are improving type annotations. So here's an example where I improved a type hint in Flask SQL Alchemy. And so you can see here, fairly small change. And then adding a little test for it here. But in order to make sure that this was correct, I had to run MyPy against the code. And in this case, I ran MyPy using Tox because that's what I was set up. But there's other projects in which I just run MyPy straight. And I've had to learn a lot about type annotations, and they can actually get really hairy for Python, since Python is, kind of a duck type language. And so in order to support the flexibility of Python type annotations can get really complex. So I always go to the MyPy documentation when I am trying to, figure out something. I go here first, and if I can't figure it out from here, then I go a searching. But it's always good to have this MyPy cheat sheet up. Definitely really helpful. Another tool that is used by lots and lots of packages is PyTest for testing. PyTest it's great. It's really powerful. There's lots of plugins for it. And of course, if you're making a Python package, you do want to test it. So here you can see with my very large PR to change Flask SQL Alchemy to support SQL Alchemy 2.0, I ended up, like, most of my PR actually was tests, which is good. I think it's a good thing when most of my PR is tests. And the thing that I did that really bolted up was parameterizing tests in order to future back proof it, to make sure that it's really working for all the different permutations that a developer might, pass in. So that's something to keep in mind, is that not just writing, a simple test, but parameterizing tests in order to check for lots of situations. So that's a really helpful tool as well, PyTest. The final tool I want to plug is Git. I've been using Git for a long time, but using Git for a package is like, a whole other ball game. It's, you often have to, do a few more things that you might not do on your personal projects. Like for me, I don't usually rebase, but for other projects, they've asked me to do rebase. But fortunately, like David Lord from the Palettes project, he said, like, don't worry, there's always a way to undo. It's okay, you can mess up. And so that's been very empowering for me, knowing that in theory, there's a way to undo things, hopefully so far. So that's something I've experienced as well, is like, learning new Git workflows, other ways of using Git that I wouldn't normally inflict on myself in a personal project. But it's been great. I mean, and that's one of the great things about contributing to open source Python projects is learning new tools and new ways of doing things. And it's always a great learning experience. So highly recommend it.
We also see that rebase is the way as well. I've not been asked to I think I've done it like once or twice, and each time I'm like looking at the docs and being like, make sure I'm not messing anything up. Wow, you went like way in depth, Pamela. Thank you so much. This is so good. Like, and we got the demos and everything. It was like 5 stars on the project. Awesome. Good.
Really quick. I think that last part, like as we're talking in the chat, like understanding the desires of the maintainer. Like some maintainers are definitely like, squash your commits down to just the changes that you've made. We don't want the 15 comments of like, trying it again. Did it work this time? Maybe this time. And again, I am talking to myself because I submit all of those things, but I can definitely understand how, you know, sometimes there's a heavy emphasis on wanting to keep your history clean. And there's sometimes like no, we need to see the entire process that happened. And if we don't do it the way that they want, then we then have to figure out like how to then go back and then work in their way, which is often really, really complicated to do. Which also learn to read the contributing.md file first before you start doing stuff.
Yes.
100%. Awesome. Cool. Okay. We're actually making really good time. We have a couple more questions. We have a repeat question from one of our genius colleagues. Let's see. How does the community around open source software evolve? Shouldn't it just be focused on the code? Oh, I have the wrong order. All right, let me put it back in the right order. Okay. She looks familiar. Comes from when a organization or group of people reach critical mass, they need to start deciding on how they're going to start deciding on things. So there's like lots of emails and lots of in-person meetings and lots of notes and minutes and agendas that end up happening and are these like downstream effects that a lot of people don't focus on when they really are just like installing my Python executable and pip installing all of the packages in the ecosystem, for example. So I think it's really interesting. I'm on the Python Software Foundation board and spend a lot of my time kind of waxing poetic about how to do software foundations better and about things that kind of intersect with that as well, like open source licensing and legalities in different countries and data protections and things like that, because, you know, we do try to keep track of our members and have them engage and have them vote. And we're talking about parliamentary procedures as well. So it's I think it's really interesting and overlooked in Python specifically because that's the one that I've had the most visibility into. But I also participate in the core team of Wagtail CMS, and I'm an advocate for ethical source licensing. So a couple other communities too that talk about the same stuff. But Python in particular is really special because we've adopted some of the larger foundation type structures where mentioned parliamentary procedure, but I think we remain pretty lean and people oriented. You know, that's absolutely debatable, but that's one of the things that I think that I try that we inject into the community is remaining really focused on people and like the people who are using the code. All right. Yeah, so any more thoughts on the PS stuff? We have some friends who also interact with the DS stuff. Palettes is another org that is like a little bit more lightweight, more flexible. So there's definitely opportunities where you can make great code without all of the organizational structure, but then the organizational structure really does provide some benefits. More thoughts on that?
I would love to learn more about I think there was a message like way early in the chat, like way early in the chat about like defining what even is open source. and talking about like, yo, that's a whole like multiple hour conversation about how everybody thinks of open source as
Yep.
this like it either is or it isn't. Yeah, I've worked for too many companies that have had that have gotten yelled at by OSI to feel like I want to have that conversation. But I do think that there is this new wave of like ethical source that you even brought up. Can you talk a little bit about that part of it?
Yeah, so I have a couple of talks on it, and I can put it in the chat, the link. But so there's the idea that like, and I respect and really appreciate a lot of the work that the OSI does. And right now, I believe among the community, they're more like the definitive source on determining what is capital O, capital S open source. But ethical source has uses the same tool. We would go through the same process if someone is violating the license in any of the stipulations we're in, or you would start with like an injunction and a cease and desist of use, X, Y, and Z. But instead of it being through the lens of capitalism, which is what I feel that most open source licenses at this moment are looking at, you can't make money off of these things. You can't use it in a closed source project and have other like kind of offshoots. And it is a copyleft license, that means all of the downstream works will benefit from having that license in its root. And we have ethical source licenses of all sorts of varieties. So the one that I work on is called the anti-racist license, but Coraline Ada Emke is the founder or the creator of the first one that I've heard of, and she also created the Organization for Ethical Source. And that one's called the Hippocratic License, where it's first do no harm. And I think it's really interesting. There are some people who say we are not capital O, capital S, we are lowercase o, lowercase s. I don't know. That's a fight I'm willing to have. I think it's a really interesting one. And there's also some other conversations that have been happening around open source licensing. That's in a completely different side, where some of these language learning models have open source licenses as well that are new. And so people are debating the merits of that and what organization gets to kind of determine what that means, which is a fun talk. I like fighting as long as we're fighting fair.
I don't think we can comment directly to the Twitch folks that just joined us. Hi, Twitch folks. There was a question of, so it's a new license type. I think it is it does the same thing that a license is designed to do, which is decide how this code can be used. It's just not talking about how this code can be used in conjunction with other code. It's talking more about how this code can be used in application. And sometimes in other code, like, I think it's, again, like you said, the capital O, capital S open source versus the I always hear it, the spirit of open source, which is like, oh, is that like the place where you go get costumes for open source during the fall? But yeah. And does it fold into other license types? I mean, yes, you can have multiple licenses. And that becomes kind of a different question.
Yeah, we could absolutely have a whole talk on this, and it probably
ping us in the
be on
Discord.
this channel. Yeah, follow us on the Discord. We'll put it on the lower third, so you can join us, and we could just chat about it. But it's something I do in my free time. It's just definitely personal darn kind of thing. Cool. We made excellent timing. We got through all of the questions. We had great discussions. I'm so appreciative of all of the contributions my teammates have made today. Do we have any closing thoughts before I read us out? Talk to the maintainers, reach out, join communities. Open source is really cool. Microsoft loves open source.
Maintainers want you to talk to them. They're not all scary. I have so many open source projects. I have been a bad maintainer and that I've neglected so many of them. And I would love for people to take a look at them and say, hey, I would love to use this, but it needs some TLC. Yes, let's talk about that TLC and how you can provide it. We are humans. we have burnout, we have mental health issues. It's always good when someone says, hey, how can I help? And I promise we all won't unload on you like I just did.
Any more thoughts before we go?
This is it's a great month to start contributing to open source because it's Hacktober.
It is.
So use that as an excuse.
All right. I'll close this out. I can get my script, but I think I'm just gonna wing it today. I forgot to copy my script over. That's okay. So excited to have everyone here. Again, the Python Pulse is every second Friday of the month. Here on this channel, you may also be visiting us on Twitch. So glad wherever you found us. Keep finding us. Tell your friends. And next one is going to be the second week in November. Find us on the Python Discord, aka.ms/Python-Discord, which Jay kindly put into the chat for us. And it's been a blast. See y'all next time.